Okay. Hey, you guys like my tie? I mean, it's pretty nice, right? It kind of matches my shirt. It's got a red stripe in it. My shirt has these red stripes.
Why is it so short?
I didn't steal it from my son. I got it from one of my former student workers who wore ties about like this.
Can you wash it and it shrink?
No. I think it's. I mean, it's just made like that, but.
It's fun size.
This is excellent. The guys on the elevator really look strange at me. And you wouldn't believe how people are afraid to say anything. You know, you get on the elevator with this, they're like, I mean, how you gonna just stand there and go, a guy wearing a kid's tie? Well, let me show you what makes this tie so special. It's right here. It's all in the knot. You see that's a perfect V. It's even got these little creases on it. This is a very perfect knot, and so, I mean, that's the reason why you'd wear a tie like this, right? You got a tie like this, Clint?
I sure do. It's yellow.
Just like this? So you don't have to tie it? Well, it looked a little ridiculous, right? Because it's way too short. You might be the perfect build for a clip-on tie. You might be. John Ward might be the perfect build for a clip-on tie. Most guys are not, because it just don't happen to where you're all the right length. As a matter of fact, I knew another guy who wore a zip-up tie. You ever seen a zip-up tie? Mm-hmm. And he's like, I mean, it's right about here, really. He's like, can you tell? Yeah. I mean, I can tell something's not right. And so, it's important that we kind of learn a little bit about tying ties, right? All right, well, I'm going to take you through quickly just some, your next lesson coming up after the ones that are presenting on Thursday is going to be the demonstration or simulation methods of teaching. So let's just talk about this a little bit. Very important that you give good, high-quality demonstrations whenever you're working with your students, because it helps them to develop their psychomotor skills. What's psychomotor skills? Psychomotor, like crazy motors?
Mind to hand.
There you go, using your hands. Going from your mind to hand, John says. That's exactly right. Going from your mind to your hand to be able to do this. It's important you give them a step-by-step procedure, accompanied by illustrations and explanations. And so in order to conduct a good, well-thought-out, well-planned demonstration, you have to be ready, right? You have to have all these things in hand. We saw Dr. Nolan down at Talsa give a demonstration with the torch. You know, we talked about this when we came back. He didn't have to look for the wrenches. He didn't have to look for his gloves or his goggles or whatever. Beforehand, he'd obviously been out there and he had everything he was going to need laid out on that table. So he was ready, and he knew exactly step by step by step how he's going to do this. He'd probably given that same demonstration 40 times, you know, so he knew exactly what he was going to do. But to begin with, we're going to have a list of steps right in front of us so that we can follow it and go down the line in your planning. Here's some requisites or things that have to be in order to give you a good, successful demonstration. First of all, determine what you're going to accomplish, and that's led by your objectives. I think everybody's right on track with objectives now, that you can write these with the behavior and the condition and the criteria built into them. Determine the feasibility. Is this something that you really are going to be able to demonstrate? And you're thinking about demonstration versus simulation. Are you going to really be able to bring in maybe a farm animal and do some surgery or whatever it is you want to do? Maybe you have to simulate if you can't really bring in the actual materials. And so think about that. Determine the scope. If it's a demonstration that's just too large, it gets confusing, and so you might want to break it down into different pieces and parts. If you're demonstrating the disassembly of a small gas engine, you're probably going to disassemble the head part first and then maybe the bottom end next. And so you do it in pieces. You have to have a very good plan, very thorough plan, carefully assemble the necessary items like we talked about before. And here, this is pretty important too, to rehearse the demonstration. Now, as we're thinking about that little rafter thing that I showed you there that we're going over in our class of structures class, it requires that we take it to laying out a rafter, you know, and we laid it out. We laid out stair stringers, we laid out rafters. We did it on brown towels instead of using actual boards, so we used a simulation method essentially. But you better believe that yesterday or before yesterday, Was yesterday Monday? All right, on Friday I started thinking about this, and then yesterday morning about 8 o'clock before my students show up, I'm making sure that I look at the square and that I'll still remember, and I've done this 40 times probably. And so making sure I still understand what to do and laying it out there, because it gets pretty embarrassing if you're there with the square in your hand, you're saying, just can't really remember which way this goes, and you flip it over 13 times before you finally get it. It's not going to be very conducive to your students learning whenever you're trying to figure it out right there in front of them. So rehearse the demonstration. You don't want this, whenever you demonstrate how to weld a bead for your students in the class, you don't want that to be the first time you touched a welder in the last 6 months or the last 2 years. You want to make sure you're out there the day before. Making it, you might tell them you have to touch one in 6 months if you want to lead them that way, but you make sure that you have. So you determine the scope. What's that mean? What's the scope?
What you plan to do?
Yeah, it's kind of the size of what you're doing. You know, is this going to be a demonstration that covers lighting, extinguishing, the torch, changing the tips, cleaning the tips, or what? I mean, what are we going to include in here? Maybe it's just a demonstration of cleaning the tips. Write down each step to follow. Now, this is where your lesson plan for these type of lessons gets real easy. It's because in a demonstration or simulation, the presentation part of your lesson plan is just a list. That's all. It's just a list of steps that you're going to do in this demonstration. You don't have to develop a PowerPoint. You don't have to develop anything. I don't care how you do it, but write down every single step, bulleted steps or numbered steps, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the steps of your demonstration. Doesn't have to be anything extremely sophisticated either. Anybody been thinking about what you're going to do for a demonstration?
How to tie
How to tie. Bad news on that one. Richard, what are you thinking?
Probably how to clean a carburetor.
How to clean a carburetor. There you go. Now that one, that's good. That may be even as a pretty good size scope, even just in that. You know, the whole disassembly of a carburetor is a fairly, I don't know if you've never done it before. There's a lot of details that you're going to have to put down there step by step. So anyhow, maybe you start with we pick up in the lesson where you've already disassembled the carburetor, and then you demonstrate how to clean the various pieces of it and reassemble it. So anyhow, think about that.
If you can't find the pieces to reassemble it.
That's a problem. That's definitely a problem. So you decide on the key information for the steps, what you really need to drive home, and the best way to convey that information. You know, whether you write out a list, I think that's the best way to do it. Create yourself a list of materials that you're going to have, and then develop an interest approach. Think about the interest approach. I mean, Richard's interest approach for cleaning the carburetor is probably pretty easy. I mean, how many times have you stood on the end of a rope going like this until you blue in the face and sweat pouring off of you? So you can relate that to other things that you do that are just absolutely pointless, because no gas is going to move through that little hole that's clogged up with that mysterious white stuff that comes from this ethanol-rich gasoline that we have. So that's a commercial for Seafoam. So the procedures for the demonstration: get the materials and tools and equipment together. Develop a felt need on the part of the students to learn the skill. What was that question that you asked yourself and you asked your students? That's right, Adam. Why in the world we need to learn this? So you convey that to the students, why you need to learn this. That gets the felt need. Give an overview of the process. That's your, what are those things? The link, motivation, overview. What do you do with the overview? Give them your objectives. The overview is just your objectives of the lesson. Present each step. Go back and repeat the difficult to understand steps. Repeat the entire process if necessary. And this one definitely have students practice. Now, while you're doing it in here, you might have time for 1 or 2 students to practice, but you definitely, if you're teaching in a high school classroom, you want to let everybody practice if possible. Here's some pitfalls that I've seen people fall into that I want you to steer clear of. Not having a mastery of the skill that's going to be demonstrated. There you go. Practice, practice, practice. Make sure that you can do it. Avoid situations where students can't see, and make sure that you're watching to see that everybody is looking and that everybody can see. Inversion of rights and lefts, that gets a little confusing whenever, especially tying a tie. I'm facing you, my right is your left. Over familiarity of the task, and this is one like I was cautioning Richard about. If you're very, very familiar with the task, you tend to leave out some steps that somebody that don't know anything about the task is going to say, wait a second, how'd you get to that point? You know, I don't understand the ones in between. So think about this from the standpoint of somebody who knows nothing about the task you're going to demonstrate. And failure to get feedback from students. And students will be sitting there with a blank look on their face, or they might even say, okay, yeah, I get it, but maybe they don't get it. So you have to get good feedback from the students to determine if you're getting through to them properly. You need to let the students practice, provide structured practice, and while you guide them and assist them and provide them feedback on how they're doing, how they're coming along with their practice. Okay, and so now if I go back into character here, I've got on my little short tie here, and you're talking about how ridiculous my tie looks, so this is kind of my interest approach here. Interest approach is I'm wearing a short, crazy-looking tie. You're talking to me about it. We're talking about ridiculous looking ties that you know people that wear. And then I'll lead into this question here. What's the official dress for males? Tell me.
Black slacks.
Corduroy blue.
Yeah, black slacks.
Black shoes. White shirt. Here, national blue, corn and gold corduroy jacket.
Official FFA jackets.
Blue tie.
Who said something about the jackets?
Zip to the top.
That's right. Zip to the top.
Start losing style there.
With only high.
Blue tie.
Yeah, well, we're going to assume that you got your jacket right. Tie. This should be an FFA tie or blue. Same color, national blue.
What about the camouflage hat everybody wears at national convention?
Not really part of the official dress.
So
Black.
boots. I mean, legit question. Black boots are fine, or is it still?
Black boots are fine, yeah.
Black socks and a black belt.
Socks and belt.
I just don't like how the blue and black.
Yeah, it clashes really
Blue on
bad.
black. It's like tears on a river. Push on shove. Don't mean much.
Well, let's go hand in hand with each other.
So what we've got here is part of the FFA official dress is the tie, right?
Yes.
So we got a tie. Now, a lot of times, most of the times, I'll have girls in this class, and so does tying a tie apply to the girls?
Nope.
They get a scar.
It does in this class because all of you are going to be ag teachers, and the girls that are going to be ag teachers are going to be teaching these little boys who can't tie the tie or helping them tie their tie, right? So here's the deal. I don't want you to go out and say, here's your motivation. I don't want you to go out and little Johnny says, hey, I need help tying my tie, and you say, I don't know how to tie a tie.
Go ask Steve.
Go ask who?
Steve.
Steve. So I want you to be able to help them tie the tie. You tie your tie, you look nice on Sunday morning, you look nice for the FFA banquet, you look nice for whatever, and you can help your students as they're getting into their official FFA dress. And so today, what I'm going to do, here's my overview, objectives for you. I'm going to teach you how to tie a tie. I'm going to teach you, as a matter of fact, 2 different types of knots. You'll be so well versed in how to tie a tie, you'll just go show off how you can tie a tie later on. As a matter of fact, later on we'll have a group picture that is one of my favorite things to do in the year. And so here I have a wonderful collection of nice ties that I've collected over the years. I mean, this one has soccer players, tennis players, field hockey, and it's nice and skinny, just like cool ties are today. And I even have one here with a trout on it. And so
My
what
favorite.
I'm going to do in just a minute is give you one of these ties, and you're going to demonstrate to me that you know how to tie it. But first of all, I'm going to give you a little demonstration. So here it goes. I'm going to take the tie. Now, I'm assuming that you're right-handed. Anybody left-handed? Good, because I don't know how that would change tying a tie, but we're going to go with this. We're going to put the fat end in our right hand, the skinny end in our left hand, put this thing over your neck, over your head, around your neck. And so, here we go. We don't even necessarily have to put it down our shirt. We're just going to learn to tie. Fat end, certainly going to be longer than the skinny end. That's how you want it to end up, right, where the fat end shows. Now, here's a good rule of thumb. There's usually a button somewhere about your sternum here. And if you line up the point on the little end somewhere in the near region of that, you're going to come out about right. Really depends on diameter of your neck. guys like me and Adam